I was sold to a stranger in front of the entire town, and everyone just watched. My name is Elena Whitmore, and on a freezing February morning, my father shook hands with a man I'd never met and announced I was now his property. 20 years old, standing in the general store while people whispered and stared. The man they called the Mountain Devil, Caleb Grayson, didn't even look at me, just signed papers like I was livestock. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I did neither. If you want to know how a purchased bride became the woman who destroyed an entire town's lies, stay until the end. Hit like and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. I remember the exact moment I realized my father had been lying to me my entire life. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no tears. Just a Tuesday afternoon in late January, snow piling against the windows of our cramped house on the edge of Black Hollow, and my father sitting across from me with that smile he always wore when he needed something. The smile that used to make me feel safe when I was little. Now it just made my stomach turn. "Elena, sweetheart," he said, leaning forward with his elbows on the kitchen table, "I need to talk to you about something important." I should have known, should have recognized the tone, but I was 20 years old and still stupid enough to believe parents told their children the truth. "What is it?" I asked, wiping flour from my hands. I'd been making bread, always making bread. My hands perpetually dusted white, my hair tied back, my life a repetitive cycle of cooking, cleaning, and pretending everything was fine. "There's an opportunity," he said carefully. "A way to secure our future. Your future." The word opportunity should have been my first warning. Men like my father, men who gambled away wages and borrowed from everyone in town, didn't have opportunities. They had schemes. What kind of opportunity? I kept my voice even, but something cold was already creeping up my spine. He cleared his throat. "There's a man, a rancher up in the mountains, Caleb Grayson. You've heard of him?" Everyone had heard of Caleb Grayson. The Mountain Devil, people called him. A man who lived alone on thousands of acres of land, who came into town twice a year for supplies and spoke to no one. Stories about him ranged from ridiculous to terrifying. He'd killed a man with his bare hands. He'd gone mad from isolation. He kept wolves as pets. I'd seen him once from a distance, tall and dark-haired, moving through the market like a ghost no one dared approach. "I've heard of him," I said slowly. "Why?" My father's smile widened. "He's made a proposal. A very generous proposal." The cold feeling turned to ice. "What kind of proposal?" "Marriage, sweetheart. He wants a wife, and he's willing to pay handsomely for the arrangement." The words didn't make sense at first. They hung in the air like something foreign, something from a different century. Marriage, pay, arrangement. "You're joking," I whispered. "I'm not." He reached across the table to take my hand, but I pulled away. "Elena, listen to me. This is a good thing. Grayson has money, land, security. You'd never want for anything." "You want to sell me?" "Don't be dramatic. It's not selling. It's an agreement, a contract, and it solves everything. The debts, the gossip, your future." "My future?" I stood so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "You're talking about my future like I'm not even here." "Sit down, Elena." "No." His face hardened. That was the thing about my father. He could shift from charming to cruel in seconds. "Sit down." I sat. Not because I wanted to, because 20 years of conditioning made my legs obey before my brain could protest. "This isn't a discussion," he said coldly. "The deal is done. Papers are signed. You're marrying Caleb Grayson in 2 weeks." The room tilted. You signed papers without telling me?" "You're my daughter. I have the legal right." "Legal right?" My voice cracked. "I'm not a child. I'm 20 years old." "Then act like it." He stood, pushing his chair back. "Stop being selfish. This family is drowning in debt because of your mother's medical bills, because of— Don't you dare bring her into this." Tears burned my eyes now, hot and furious. "She's been dead 3 years and you're still using her as an excuse." His hand slammed against the table. "Watch your mouth." I flinched, hated myself for flinching. "I've made my decision," he said, voice low and dangerous. "You will marry Grayson. You will do it with dignity, and you will be grateful I found someone willing to take you at all." The words hit like a slap. Willing to take you at all, as if I were damaged goods, as if I should be thankful some isolated rancher wanted to buy a bride. "What if I refuse?" I whispered. He laughed, actually laughed. "Refuse? And go where, Elena? Do what? You have no money, no skills beyond cooking and cleaning, no prospects. You think anyone in this town would hire you, rent you a room? You're unmarried, past prime age, with nothing to your name. You refuse this and you'll end up in the streets. Or worse." Worse. He didn't need to elaborate. We both knew what happened to desperate women in frontier towns. I wanted to scream that he was wrong, that I could find work, could survive on my own. But the truth was a heavy stone in my chest. I couldn't. He'd made sure of that, kept me isolated, uneducated beyond basic literacy, dependent on him for everything. "Why?" My voice broke. "Why would you do this?" Something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Or just annoyance that I wouldn't accept my fate quietly. "Because I'm your father," he said, "and I know what's best." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of humiliation. News spread through Black Hollow like wildfire. People I'd known my entire life suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Women whispered behind their hands at church. Men looked at me with a mixture of pity and something uglier, speculation about what kind of girl got sold off to the mountain devil. I tried to leave the house as little as possible, but my father made me come to town for the engagement announcement, a formal gathering at the general store where he could show off his successful negotiation. I'll never forget that day, standing in the center of the store while half the town watched. My father beaming like he'd won a prize, and Caleb Grayson. He didn't look at me. He stood near the door, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dark clothes that made him seem even more imposing. His face was hard, unreadable. When our eyes met for a split second, I saw nothing. No kindness, no cruelty. Just emptiness. "This is my daughter, Elena," my father announced loudly, one hand on my shoulder like I was a horse he was trying to sell. "And this is her intended, Caleb Grayson. We've come to a very favorable arrangement." Favorable. The word made me want to vomit. Mrs. Henderson, the baker's wife, leaned toward her friend and whispered something that made them both giggle. A man near the counter, I didn't catch his name, muttered, "Poor girl. Wonder what she did to deserve that." "Probably nothing," someone else replied. "Heard her father's been in debt for years. So he's selling her off to clear it? Seems like." They weren't even trying to be quiet. Everyone knew. Everyone understood exactly what this was. Caleb's jaw tightened. He heard them too, but he said nothing. Just signed the final papers my father laid out, his handwriting sharp and controlled. "Well," my father said brightly, "I think this calls for a drink. To new beginnings." A few men joined him. Most people just stared. At me, at Caleb, at the spectacle we'd become. I wanted to disappear. "Miss Whitmore." I jumped. Caleb was suddenly standing in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to see his face. Up close, he was even more intimidating, tall enough to block out the light from the window, with dark eyes that seemed to look straight through me. "Yes?" My voice came out small. I hated how small it sounded. "The wagon's outside," he said quietly. "We leave in an hour." "An hour? But I thought—" "Changed plans." He glanced at my father, who was laughing loudly with a group of men near the counter. Something dark crossed Caleb's expression. "Get your things. Whatever you want to bring." "Wait, today? We're leaving today?" "Yes." "But the wedding isn't for another week. We'll marry at the ranch." His tone left no room for argument. "1 hour, Miss Whitmore." He walked out before I could respond. I stood there, frozen, until Mrs. Henderson approached with false sympathy dripping from every word. "Oh, you poor dear. I'm sure it won't be as bad as everyone says. Grayson might be dangerous, but at least you'll have a roof over your head, won't you?" I didn't answer, couldn't answer, just turned and walked out of the store into the freezing afternoon where my breath came in short, panicked gasps. This was happening, actually happening. In 1 hour, I would leave everything I'd ever known to live with a stranger on an isolated mountain ranch, a man the entire town feared, a man who'd just purchased me like properties. The wagon ride was silent. Caleb sat beside me, reins in hand, guiding 2 massive draft horses up a winding mountain road. My belongings, a single trunk and a few wrapped bundles, sat in the back. Everything I owned in the world, and it fit in less space than a week's groceries. The town disappeared behind us quickly, swallowed by pine trees and snow. The higher we climbed, the colder it got. I pulled my shawl tighter, but it did nothing against the biting wind. "You'll need better clothes," Caleb said suddenly, his first words since we'd left. I glanced at him. "What?" "Winter gear. What you're wearing won't last a week up here." He didn't look at me, eyes fixed on the road. "I'll have supplies sent." Thank you," he grunted. I wasn't sure if that meant "you're welcome" or "stop talking." We continued in silence for another hour. The road grew narrower, more treacherous. On one side, the mountain rose steeply. On the other, a sheer drop into darkness. I tried not to look down. "Why?" The word came out before I could stop it. Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. "Why what? Why me? Why any of this?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, "Needed a wife." "But why like this? Why not court someone, marry normally?" His laugh was bitter. "You think anyone in Black Hollow would marry me normally? You heard what they call me. Mountain devil. Crazy. Dangerous." He glanced at me, expression hard. "Your father offered a solution. I took it." "So you just bought me?" "Yes." The bluntness was almost worse than a lie would have been. "And you don't care that I didn't choose this?" My voice shook. "That I don't want to be here?" "No," he said flatly. "I don't." Something inside me cracked. All the fear, the humiliation, the anger I'd been swallowing for 2 weeks, it erupted. "You're a monster," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "You know that? You're exactly what they say you are. You took advantage of my father's debts. You bought a human being, and you don't even care that you've destroyed my life." He pulled the wagon to a stop so abruptly I nearly fell forward. We sat there on the mountain road, the horses stamping nervously, snow beginning to fall in slow, fat flakes. "You want to know why I don't care?" Caleb turned to face me fully, and I saw something raw in his expression. Anger, yes, but also pain. "Because your father came to me first. Did he tell you that? He sought me out, offered you like a business transaction, and when I said I'd think about it, he dropped the price." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Twice," Caleb continued, voice low and controlled. "He dropped the price twice, desperate to get rid of you. So desperate he practically begged me to take you off his hands, said you were a burden he couldn't afford anymore." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world tilted sideways. "Still think I'm the monster?" Caleb picked up the reins again. "Or maybe you should be asking yourself why your own father was so eager to sell you." He started the wagon moving before I could respond. I sat there, numb, as snow fell harder and the mountain swallowed us whole. Bakam. The ranch appeared just as darkness fell. I'd expected something small, a cabin, maybe. Instead, we emerged from the trees to find a sprawling property, a large house, several outbuildings, fenced pastures stretching into the distance. Smoke rose from the chimney, lights glowed in the windows. It was beautiful, in a harsh, isolated way. Caleb brought the wagon to a stop near the main house. He climbed down, then reached up to help me. I hesitated, then took his hand. His grip was strong, calloused, surprisingly warm. "This is it," he said, releasing me immediately. "Your new home." New home. The words felt wrong. This wasn't a home. This was a prison with nice views. "I'll show you inside, sit," he continued, grabbing my trunk from the wagon. "Kitchen's stocked. You'll have your own room. Bathroom's down the hall." "My own room?" I blinked. I thought, "We'll discuss sleeping arrangements later." He didn't look at me. "Right now, you need to warm up and eat something. You've been shivering for an hour." I had been shivering, hadn't even noticed. Inside, the house was warmer than I expected. Clean, too. Sparse furniture, but everything well maintained. A fire burned in the hearth. The smell of wood smoke and something cooking, stew maybe, filled the air. "Bedroom's upstairs," Caleb said, setting my trunk down near the stairs. "First door on the left. Bathroom's next to it. I'll bring up hot water in a bit." "Why are you being nice?" The question came out accusatory. He looked at me like I'd asked something obvious. Because you're cold and tired, and I'm not a complete bastard, despite what you think. You bought me. Yes. He moved toward the kitchen. And now you're here. And we both have to live with that. So I suggest we figure out how to do it without killing each other. I stood in the middle of his living room, my living room now, and felt something crack inside me. Not breaking, just shifting. The anger was still there, the fear, the sense of betrayal. But underneath it all was a creeping realization. This was my life now, for better or worse. And screaming about it wouldn't change anything. I hate you, I said quietly. Caleb paused in the kitchen doorway. I know. I hate my father more. Good. He almost smiled. Almost. That's the first smart thing you've said all day. Then he disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me alone with my trunk and my shattered illusions and the slowly dawning understanding that nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night. The room Caleb had given me was larger than any space I'd ever had to myself. A real bed with a thick quilt. A wardrobe. A window overlooking the mountains. Under different circumstances, I might have loved it. Instead, I sat on the floor with my back against the door, fully dressed, listening to every sound in the house. Footsteps in the hall, doors opening and closing, the creak of floorboards. Was he coming? Would he force himself into my room? Demand his rights as my husband? But the footsteps always passed by my door. And eventually, the house fell silent. I must have dozed off at some point because I woke to gray dawn light filtering through the window and my neck aching from the awkward position. The house was quiet. I crept downstairs, half expecting to find Caleb waiting. Instead, I found a note on the kitchen table. Gone to check the livestock. Food in the pantry. Make yourself at home. Make myself at home. In a stranger's house. After being sold like cattle. I crumpled the note and threw it in the fire. Then I made coffee, because what else was I supposed to do? I was halfway through my cup when the front door opened. Caleb stomped in, covered in snow, carrying an armful of firewood. You're up, he observed. I'm up, I confirmed. He set the wood by the hearth, brushing snow from his coat. Storm's coming in, big one. We'll be snowed in for at least a week. My heart sank. A week. Trapped here with him. I need to teach you some things, he continued, hanging his coat on a hook. How things work around here. Ranch management. Winter survival. You need to be able to handle yourself if something happens to me. If something happens to you? I work alone. Accidents happen. If I get hurt, you need to know how to keep this place running. He pulled out a chair sitting across from me. Can you ride a horse? No. Can you shoot? No. Butcher livestock? No. What can you do? I bristled. Cook, clean, sew, read, basic arithmetic, everything a proper lady is supposed to know. He snorted. None of that will save your life in a blizzard. Well, excuse me for not being raised to be a mountain rancher. I'm not criticizing. He held up a hand. I'm assessing. We have work to do. We don't have to do anything. You bought me, remember? I'm just property. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. If you were property, I'd leave you to freeze the first time you got lost in a snowstorm. But you're not. You're... He stopped, looked away. You're here. And I'm responsible for keeping you alive. So yes, we have work to do. I wanted to argue, wanted to throw my coffee in his face and storm upstairs and lock myself in that room and never come out. But another part of me, the part that had listened to him last night, the part that was starting to understand how thoroughly my father had betrayed me, that part whispered, what choice do you have? So I set down my cup and said, fine, teach me. His expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Good, he said. Get dressed in something warm. We start in an hour. The next week was hell. Caleb wasn't lying about the storm. Snow fell constantly, piling up against the house in massive drifts. The wind howled like something alive. The temperature dropped so low that water left in a cup would freeze in minutes. And every single day Caleb dragged me out into it. This is the barn, he said on day one, pushing open massive doors to reveal rows of stalls. 16 horses, 12 cows, too many chickens to count. They need food, water, and clean stalls every day. No exceptions. I stared at him. Every day? In this weather? Every day. Animals don't care about weather. They need care or they die. And if they die, we don't eat. He handed me a pitchfork. Start mucking stalls. I'll show you how to feed them after. It was backbreaking work. My hands blistered within an hour. My muscles screamed. I'd never done physical labor like this in my life. But Caleb didn't let up. Faster, he'd say, or cleaner. No, like this. Watch. And he'd demonstrate, moving with an efficiency that came from years of practice. Day 2, he taught me to ride. Put me on the gentlest horse he had, a mare named Willow, and made me circle the paddock until my legs went numb. Heels down, he called. Hands steady. You're tensing up. Relax. I can't relax. I'm going to fall. Then fall. You'll learn. I did fall. 3 times. Each time, Caleb just told me to get back on. Day 3, shooting lessons. He set up targets in a clearing and handed me a rifle. Hold it like this. Breathe steady. Squeeze the trigger. Don't pull. I missed every shot. My arms shook from the weight of the gun. The recoil bruised my shoulder. Again, he said, you need to be able to shoot a wolf if one comes for the livestock. Or a bear. Or worse. What's worse than a bear? He didn't answer. Day 4 through 7 blurred together. Lessons in animal care, fire management, emergency supplies, weather prediction, basic repairs. He was relentless. Demanding. He'd demonstrate something once, maybe twice, then expect me to do it myself. I'm not your teacher, he said when I complained. I'm showing you how to survive. Pay attention or don't, your choice. But here's the thing I started to notice. He was patient, gruff, yes, short-tempered sometimes. But when I struggled, he didn't mock me. When I failed, he just told me to try again. And when I finally got something right, when I managed to saddle Willow by myself, when I hit a target, when I repaired a fence post without help, he'd nod and say, "Good, now do it faster." It was the strangest form of respect I'd ever received. On the 7th night, the storm finally broke. We sat in the living room, exhausted, both of us covered in bruises and half frozen despite the fire. I was learning to tolerate Caleb's presence, maybe even appreciate it in small ways. "Why do you live up here alone?" I asked suddenly. He looked up from the book he'd been reading. "Because I choose to." "But why? Don't you get lonely? Do you always ask this many questions?" "I'm trying to understand. You have money, land. You could live anywhere. Why isolate yourself?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "People are cruel, especially in towns like Black Hollow. They make up stories, spread rumors, judge you for things you didn't do. Up here, I don't have to deal with any of that." "What stories did they spread about you?" His jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter. It matters to me. I'm living with you, married to you apparently, though we never actually had a ceremony. We'll do that tomorrow." I blinked. "What?" "The ceremony. I know a minister who lives an hour south. If the roads are clear, we'll go tomorrow. Make it legal." He set down his book. "That's what you wanted, right? For it to be official?" I don't know what I want anymore." Something shifted in his expression, almost like understanding. "Yeah, I know that feeling." We sat in silence, the fire crackling, snow still falling softly outside. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. About all of this. It's not how I wanted things to go either." It was the first real apology I'd received since this nightmare started. And somehow, coming from him, it meant more than any apology from my father ever could have. The next morning, we rode down the mountain to a small church where a minister, an old man with kind eyes, married us in a ceremony that lasted maybe 10 minutes. "Do you take this woman?" "Yes." "And do you take this man?" I looked at Caleb. He looked back at me. No pressure, no expectation, just waiting. "Yes." "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." We didn't kiss. Caleb just nodded to the minister, signed the papers, and we left. On the ride back, as the sun began to set over the mountains, I realized something that made my chest tighten. I was actually married now. Legally bound to a man I barely knew, a man who'd bought me. And yet, sitting beside him on that wagon, heading back to the isolated ranch that was now my home, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Safe. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this situation made sense. But for the first time since my father shook hands with Caleb Grayson in that general store, I wasn't afraid. I was something else entirely. And I had no idea what to do with that feeling. The first month passed in a strange rhythm I never expected to find bearable. Caleb kept his distance. We had separate rooms. He never touched me beyond the occasional steadying hand when I slipped on ice or stumbled carrying feed buckets. At night, I'd hear him moving around downstairs, sometimes chopping wood at 2 in the morning when he couldn't sleep. I never asked why. He never offered explanations. We worked. That's what we did. Every morning before dawn, we'd start the same routine: feed the animals, check fences, haul water from the well when the pipes froze. My hands stopped blistering after the 3rd week. My muscles stopped screaming after the 4th. I learned to anticipate what needed doing before Caleb had to tell me. "You're getting faster," he said one morning as I finished mucking the last stall. "Is that a compliment?" I straightened, wiping sweat from my forehead despite the freezing temperature. "It's an observation. You're impossible." "So I've been told." But there was something different in his tone, almost like humor, almost like he didn't completely hate having me around. Then the letters started coming. The first one arrived on a Tuesday. A writer came up from town, one of the few brave enough to make the mountain journey, and handed Caleb a sealed envelope. I watched from the barn as Caleb's entire body went rigid. He read whatever was inside, his jaw clenching tighter with each line. Then he crumpled the paper and threw it in the nearest fire barrel. "What was that?" I asked when he stormed past me into the barn. "Nothing." "It wasn't nothing. You looked like you wanted to kill someone." He grabbed a saddle from the wall, movements sharp and angry. "Your father." My stomach dropped. "What about him?" "He wants money. Says the arrangement didn't include enough compensation for his loss, threatening to claim I coerced him into the deal." Caleb threw the saddle over his shoulder. "He's a real piece of work, your father." I felt sick. "How much does he want?" "Doesn't matter. He's not getting it. But if he goes to the authorities, let him." Caleb's voice was cold. "I have the signed contract. Every witness from the store that day. He can't touch us." "Us." He'd said us, not me. Us. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He stopped, looking at me with something like surprise. "What for?" "For him. For all of this. You paid money for a wife and got stuck with her criminal father trying to extort you." "Elena." He set the saddle down. "Your father's actions aren't your fault. You understand that, right?" I wanted to believe him, but 20 years of conditioning made me feel responsible for every bad thing my father did. "I should write to him," I said. "Tell him to stop." "You think he'd listen to you?" "No, but I have to try." Caleb studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Fine. Write your letter, but I'm reading it before it goes out." "Why?" "Because I don't trust him not to twist your words into something he can use against us later." That us again. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with paper and ink trying to find words that would make my father understand. I wrote 3 versions, threw them all away, started a 4th. "Father, I've heard you're asking Caleb for more money. Please stop. The arrangement was made fairly, with witnesses and legal documents. You cannot change the terms now because you've decided they weren't enough. I am fine here. I am safe. I am learning to manage a ranch and survive winters and do things I never imagined I could do. Whatever you think this marriage is, you're wrong. Do not contact us again. You've taken enough. Elena." My hand shook as I signed my name. It felt like closing a door I'd never be able to open again. Caleb read it over my shoulder. "You sure about this?" "No, but it needs to be said." He folded the letter carefully. "I'll have it sent tomorrow." "Do you think he'll actually stop?" Caleb's laugh was bitter. "Men like your father never stop. They just find new ways to take." He wasn't wrong. 2 weeks later, another letter came, this time addressed to me. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. My hands went cold as I broke the seal. "Elena, how dare you speak to me that way? After everything I've done for you, after I fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head for 20 years. This is the thanks I get. A letter telling me to stop asking for what I'm owed? You've become selfish, cruel. That mountain and that man have poisoned you. You were always weak, but I didn't think you'd turn your back on family. Since you refuse to help your own father, I have no choice but to seek justice through other means. Don't be surprised when the authorities come asking questions about your so-called marriage. Don't be surprised when everyone in Black Hollow learns the truth about what you really are. A disgrace. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words cut deeper. Caleb found me sitting on the porch steps, the letter crumpled in my fist, tears I refused to shed burning behind my eyes. Elena? I couldn't speak. Just handed him the letter. He read it in silence. Then he did something I didn't expect. He sat down next to me, close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from him in the freezing air. He's trying to hurt you, Caleb said quietly. That's all this is. Manipulation. He's right, though. My voice cracked. I am turning my back on family. He stopped being family the day he sold you. That's not how it works. He's still my father. I still owe him. Whoa! You don't owe him anything. Caleb's sudden intensity made me flinch. He took a breath, forcing himself calmer. Listen to me. Parents who love their children don't sell them to pay off gambling debts. They don't write letters calling their daughters a disgrace. Whatever relationship you think you have with him, it's not real. It never was. You don't understand. He wasn't always like this. After my mother died, he changed. He's struggling. He's in pain. We're all in pain, Elena. That doesn't give us the right to destroy other people. I looked at him then, really looked at him. What happened to you? He went still. What? Whatever made you come up here? Whatever made you hate people enough to live alone on a mountain? What happened? For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stood, walked to the porch railing, stared out at the snow-covered landscape. I had a wife before you, he said finally. My breath caught. What? 6 years ago, Sarah. We lived in Black Hollow. I worked as a ranch hand, saved every penny, thought we'd build a life together. His voice was flat, emotionless. Then she got pregnant, and suddenly everyone in town had opinions. About me, about her, about whether the child was even mine. Why would they question that? Because I was poor, an outsider, easy target for gossip. He gripped the railing. The rumors got so bad that Sarah's parents convinced her to leave me, said I wasn't good enough, that she deserved better, that the baby would be better off without a father like me. That's horrible. It gets worse. She left, went back to her parents' house, had the baby, a girl. I tried to visit. They wouldn't let me. Got the law involved. Restraining order. Said I was dangerous. He laughed bitterly. I'd never touched Sarah in anger, never raised my voice, but none of that mattered. They'd decided who I was, and nothing I said would change it. I felt tears sliding down my face. What happened to your daughter? Don't know. Sarah moved away, took the baby. I never saw either of them again. He turned to face me. That's when I bought this land. Took every penny I'd saved and got as far from Black Hollow as possible. Swore I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. Then why did you agree to marry me? He was quiet for a moment. Because I'm 32 years old and I'm tired of being alone. Because this ranch is too much for one person. Because... He stopped, started again. Because when your father came to me with his offer, I thought maybe this time it would be different. A business arrangement. Clear terms, no emotions to complicate things. And now? Now I realize how stupid that was. He moved toward the door. You can't buy companionship, Elena. You can't purchase trust. All I did was drag you into my isolation and convince myself it was somehow better than what you had before. It is better, I said. He stopped. What? I stood, facing him. This? Here. It's better than what I had. My father never respected me. Never taught me anything useful, never asked what I wanted. You've done all of that in a month, so yes, this arranged marriage is horrible and neither of us chose it, but at least you treat me like a person. That's more than he ever did. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Not quite hope, but close. I need to check the north fence, he said roughly. Storm damaged it last night. I'll be back before dark. He left before I could respond. I sat back down on the porch steps, holding my father's letter, and made a decision. I wouldn't respond, wouldn't defend myself, wouldn't give him any more power over me. If he wanted to go to the authorities, let him. We had proof. Witnesses, truth. And if Black Hollow wanted to gossip and judge and make up stories, fine. I didn't live there anymore. I lived here, on this mountain, with a man who'd been hurt as badly as I had. Maybe we could figure out how to stop hurting together. The third letter came a week later. This time, it wasn't from my father. It was from Mrs. Henderson, the baker's wife, who'd pitied me in the general store. Dear Elena, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been thinking about you often since your sudden departure. Several of us ladies in town have been concerned about your welfare, given the circumstances of your marriage. There have been troubling rumors circulating about Mr. Grayson's treatment of young women. Nothing confirmed, of course, but enough talk that we felt obligated to reach out. If you are in any danger or if you need assistance escaping your situation, please know that you have friends in Black Hollow who would help. Your father has been quite vocal about his regrets regarding the arrangement. He's told several people that he was pressured into it and fears for your safety. If this is true, please send word immediately. We're praying for you, dear. Regards, Mrs. Henderson. I read the letter twice, my hand shaking with fury. Caleb, I shouted. He came running from the barn, alarmed. What's wrong? I shoved the letter at him. Read this. He did. His face went carefully blank. I see. They're spreading lies about you. My father is telling everyone you're dangerous, that I'm trapped here, that he regrets the marriage. Elena, no, this isn't right. He's the one who came to you. He's the one who practically begged you to take me, and now he's playing victim and everyone believes him. That's what people do. Caleb's voice was cold. They believe what makes a good story. Dangerous mountain man forces innocent girl into marriage. That's compelling. Reality's always more boring. So we just let them think whatever they want? What choice do we have? Ride into town and defend ourselves? You think anyone would believe us? I don't care what they believe. I care about the truth. He grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. The truth doesn't matter to people like that. They've already decided what happened. Nothing we say will change their minds. Then what do? We keep living, keep working, prove through our actions that we're not what they think we are. That could take years. Yes, he released me. It probably will. I wanted to scream, wanted to ride down that mountain and drag my father into the street and make him tell everyone what really happened. But deep down, I knew Caleb was right. People had already chosen their narrative. We were just characters in a story they'd written for us. I hate this, I whispered. I know. I hate them. I know. I hate that they get to win. They're not winning, Elena. He tilted my chin up, making me meet his eyes. They're stuck in that town, living their small lives, needing gossip to feel important. We're here, free, building something real. Who's really winning? It was the first time he touched me with any kind of gentleness. His hand was rough, calloused, but warm. And for just a moment, I let myself lean into that warmth. Then I pulled away, because I wasn't ready for whatever that meant. I'm going to write back to Mrs. Henderson, I said. And say what? The truth. That I'm fine. That you've never hurt me. That my father is lying. She won't believe you. Maybe not, but I'll know I tried. Caleb nodded slowly. Then I'll post it tomorrow. That night, I wrote the hardest letter of my life. Mrs. Henderson, thank you for your concern, though I'm afraid it's misplaced. I am not in danger. I have not been mistreated. My husband has shown me nothing but respect since I arrived. I understand my father has been telling stories about being pressured into our arrangement. That is a lie. He came to Caleb willingly. He negotiated terms. He dropped his asking price multiple times because he was desperate to be rid of me. These are facts, with witnesses. If he now regrets his decision, that is his burden to carry, not mine. I know you mean well, but I don't need rescue. I need people to stop assuming I'm a victim simply because my marriage wasn't conventional. I'm learning to run a ranch. I'm learning to survive. I'm learning that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. Please tell anyone who asks that Elena Whitmore, Elena Grayson now, is exactly where she chooses to be. Sincerely, Elena Grayson. I signed my married name with a small spark of defiance. Let them make of that what they wanted. Caleb read it over breakfast. This will probably make things worse. I don't care anymore. They'll say I forced you to write it. Let them. He looked at me with something like admiration. You're getting stubborn. Good. I've been a doormat long enough. The corner of his mouth twitched. Yeah, you have. He posted the letter that afternoon, and for a few weeks we heard nothing back. I should have known that silence was just the calm before the storm. The first sign of real trouble came on a gray March morning. Caleb had ridden down to the lower pasture to check on calving season. I was in the barn, feeding the horses, when I heard voices outside. Not Caleb's voice. Other voices. Men's voices. I stepped out of the barn to find 3 men on horseback, all wearing badges. Sheriff's deputies, I realized, with a jolt of fear. Can I help you? I tried to keep my voice steady. The lead deputy, a man with a thick mustache and cold eyes, looked me up and down. You, Elena Whitmore? Elena Grayson. Right, Grayson. He said it like a dirty word. We're here to speak with your husband. He around? He's working. What's this about? Official business, ma'am. We need to see him. I asked what this is about. The deputy's expression hardened. We've received a formal complaint regarding the nature of your marriage. Claims of coercion, improper conduct, and financial manipulation. We're here to investigate. My father. This was my father's doing. There's nothing to investigate, I said firmly. My marriage is legal and consensual. That's not for you to decide, ma'am. Now where's Grayson? I said he's working. If you want to speak with him, you can wait here like civilized people, or you can come back another time. One of the other deputies snickered. Got some fire in her, doesn't she? Mrs. Grayson. The lead deputy dismounted. We can do this easy or we can do this hard. But one way or another, we're speaking with your husband today. Then I suggest you wait. I turned to go back into the barn, but the deputy grabbed my arm. I don't think you understand the situation. Let go of her. Caleb's voice cut through the air like a blade. He stood at the edge of the clearing, still mounted, but his entire body radiated danger. The deputy released me immediately. Caleb Grayson? That's me. Caleb dismounted slowly, deliberately. You have about 5 seconds to explain why you're on my property, grabbing my wife. We're investigating a complaint. I don't care about your complaint. You touched her. That's a problem. The tension ratcheted up immediately. I could see the deputy's hands moving toward their weapons. Could see Caleb's jaw clench so tight I thought his teeth would crack. Caleb, I said quietly. It's fine. He barely touched me. It's not fine. His eyes never left the deputy's. State your business and get off my land. The lead deputy's hand rested on his gun. We're here on behalf of Marcus Whitmore, who's filed a formal complaint alleging that you coerced him into an improper marriage arrangement with his daughter. He claims you manipulated him while he was in financial distress and that his daughter is being held against her will. That's a lie, I said immediately. All of it. With respect, ma'am, we need to hear your statement separately from your husband to ensure there's no undue influence. Undue influence? I laughed, but it came out harsh. My father sold me to pay off gambling debts. That's the truth. Not coercion. Not manipulation. A business transaction that he initiated. Do you have proof of that? We have signed contracts, Caleb said coldly. Witness statements. Every document properly filed and notarized. We'll need to see those. Fine. They're in the house. Elena, go get the strongbox from my desk. I hesitated. I didn't want to leave him alone with these men. But Caleb gave me a look that said, trust me, so I went. Inside, my hands shook as I retrieved the metal box containing all our legal documents. Through the window, I could see Caleb and the deputies talking, voices rising. One deputy had his hand on his gun. Another was gesturing aggressively. When I returned, the lead deputy was in Caleb's face. Don't care what your papers say. If she's being held here against her will. I'm not. I shoved between them, the strongbox clutched to my chest. I'm not being held against my will. I'm here because I choose to be. Because despite how this marriage started, it's better than anything I had in Black Hollow. Mrs. Grayson, please calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. You rode up here with accusations and drawn weapons because my father lied to you. And instead of investigating the truth, you're treating my husband like a criminal. Elena. Caleb's hand on my shoulder. Give them the documents. I did. Watched as the lead deputy flipped through page after page of signed contracts, witness statements, legal filings. "This all looks legitimate," he admitted grudgingly. "Because it is," Caleb said. "But that doesn't prove she wasn't coerced." "For the last time," I said, my voice shaking with fury, "I wasn't coerced. My father came to Caleb, offered me like I was cattle, dropped his price twice because he was desperate. I didn't want this marriage, but it happened legally, and I'm making the best of it. If my father told you anything different, he lied." The deputies exchanged glances. "We'll need to file a report." "File whatever you want." Caleb took the documents back. "But do it off my property, now." They left, but not before the lead deputy turned back with one final threat. "We'll be watching, Grayson. If anything happens to her, nothing will happen to her. Because unlike everyone else in her life, I actually give a damn about her welfare." The deputies rode away, disappearing into the trees. The moment they were gone, my legs gave out. I sat down hard in the dirt, adrenaline crashing through my system. Caleb knelt beside me. "You all right?" "No." "Yes, I don't know." I looked up at him. "This is just going to keep happening, isn't it? My father won't stop until he's destroyed us." "Then we make sure there's nothing to destroy." "How?" He pulled me to my feet. "We stop hiding. Stop acting like we have something to be ashamed of. We go to town, face them all, tell our story before your father can tell it for us. They won't believe us. Maybe not, but at least we'll know we fought back." I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for barely 2 months, this stranger who was somehow becoming the most reliable person in my life. "When?" I asked. "Next week. Market day. When everyone's there." He squeezed my hand. "You ready for that?" No, I wasn't ready at all, but I said yes anyway. Because I was done running, done hiding, done letting my father control the narrative of my life. If Black Hollow wanted a show, I'd give them one they'd never forget. The week before market day, I barely slept. Every night I'd lie awake rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd stand, what expression I'd wear when I faced the entire town. Would I cry? Would my voice shake? Would I freeze up the moment I saw my father's face? Caleb found me on the porch at 3 in the morning 2 days before we were supposed to leave, wrapped in a blanket and staring at nothing. "Can't sleep?" He sat down beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "Keep thinking about what might happen. Want to talk through it?" I pulled the blanket tighter. "What if nobody believes me? What if they think you forced me to defend you? What if my father turns the whole thing around and makes it worse?" "Then we deal with it." "That's not helpful." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "Elena, I need to tell you something about the marriage contract." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "When your father and I made the arrangement, there were additional terms, things I didn't tell you." "What kind of things?" He took a breath. "I put a clause in the contract stating that if at any point you wanted to leave, you could, no questions asked. And if you did leave within the first 2 years, half my land would transfer to your name automatically." I stared at him. "What?" "You'd own 1,500 acres, free and clear, enough to sell and live comfortably anywhere you wanted." When did you do this?" "The day we signed. I had my lawyer at it before your father saw the final papers. He was so focused on the cash payment, he never read the property clause." My hands started shaking. "So this whole time I could have just left? I could have walked away and you'd have given me half your ranch?" "Yes." "And you never told me. I wanted you to stay because you chose to, not because you felt trapped." He looked at me then, and his eyes were raw with something I couldn't name. "You're not my prisoner, Elena. You never were. I just needed you to figure that out on your own." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. For 2 months, I'd been operating under the assumption that I had no choice, no power, no way out. And the whole time, Caleb had given me an escape route I never knew existed. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because before we go to town and make this public, you need to know the truth. All of it. And then you need to decide if you still want to stand beside me." He stood, heading for the door. "We leave at dawn, day after tomorrow. If you're not in the wagon, I'll know your answer." He went inside, leaving me alone with a truth that shattered everything I thought I understood. I had a choice. I'd always had a choice. The question was, what did I want to choose? I stayed on that porch until sunrise, thinking about the girl I'd been 2 months ago. Scared. Powerless. Convinced her life was over. That girl wouldn't have survived this mountain, wouldn't have learned to ride or shoot or manage livestock in sub-zero temperatures, wouldn't have stood up to sheriff's deputies or written letters defending her marriage. That girl was gone. Someone else had taken her place, someone stronger, angrier, more certain of who she was and what she deserved, and that someone knew exactly what choice she was going to make. When Caleb came downstairs that morning, I was already dressed and packing supplies for the trip. "I'm coming," I said before he could ask. "But not because I'm your wife, because I'm tired of letting my father win." Something like relief crossed his face. "Fair enough. And when this is over, we're going to have a very long conversation about you keeping secrets." Looking forward to it. We left before dawn, the wagon packed with supplies to sell at market. The ride down the mountain was tense and silent. My stomach churned with each mile that brought us closer to Black Hollow, closer to my father, closer to the moment where I'd have to face everyone who'd watched me be sold and done nothing. "You know what you're going to say?" Caleb asked as the town came into view. "No, but I'll figure it out." "That's not exactly a plan. Do you have a better one?" He smiled grimly. "Not really." Black Hollow looked exactly the same. Same wooden buildings, same muddy streets, same people going about their lives like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had changed. We pulled into the market square just as vendors were setting up. People stopped to stare. Conversations died mid-sentence. I saw Mrs. Henderson clutch her friend's arm, eyes wide. Saw the blacksmith's son point at us and say something to his father. Saw a group of women outside the general store start whispering furiously. "Showtime," Caleb muttered. We climbed down from the wagon. I felt like every eye in town was on me, judging, speculating, waiting to see what would happen next. "Elena!" I turned to see Mrs. Henderson hurrying over, her face a mask of concern. "Oh, my dear, we've been so worried. When you didn't respond to my last letter—" "I did respond," I said calmly. "I told you I was fine." "Yes, but—" She glanced at Caleb nervously. "We weren't sure if you were writing of your own free will." "I was. I am." I took a breath. "Mrs. Henderson, I appreciate your concern, but it's misplaced. My husband has never hurt me or forced me to do anything. Whatever my father told you was a lie." Her eyes widened. "Your father is a respected member of this community. Why would he lie about something so serious? To cover his own guilt?" I kept my voice steady, even as my heart hammered. "He's the one who arranged this marriage. He's the one who came to Caleb begging for money. He's the one who dropped his asking price because he was desperate to be rid of me. These are facts, Mrs. Henderson. Ask anyone who was in the general store that day." She looked scandalized. That's quite an accusation. "It's the truth, and I'm done pretending otherwise." Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the growing crowd. "There she is! There's my daughter!" My father pushed through the crowd, and I felt my entire body go rigid. He looked terrible, thinner than I remembered, his face haggard, his clothes rumpled. But his eyes burned with righteous fury. "Elena, thank heavens!" He rushed toward me, arms outstretched like he meant to embrace me. Caleb stepped between us. "Don't." My father stopped, glaring at Caleb with pure hatred. "Get away from my daughter, you monster!" "She's not your daughter anymore," Caleb said coldly. "She's my wife. Legally. And you lost the right to touch her when you sold her to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People were gathering now, drawn by the confrontation like moths to flame. My father's face went red. "Sold? I didn't sell her. You coerced me. You took advantage of my financial difficulties and manipulated me into—" "Stop lying!" The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. "Just stop! Everyone here knows what you did. They were there. They watched." "Elena, sweetheart, he's gotten to you." "No!" I pushed past Caleb, getting right in my father's face. "You got to me. You. For 20 years, you controlled me, isolated me, made me think I was worthless without you, and then you sold me the moment I became inconvenient. I was trying to secure your future. You were trying to pay off your gambling debts. Don't pretend this was about me. It was never about me. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. Let them see. Let them all see what he'd done. You know what the worst part is? I would have forgiven you. If you'd just been honest. If you'd said, Elena, I made mistakes, and this is the only solution I could find. I would have understood. But instead you lied. You manipulated. You tried to turn everyone against Caleb to cover your own guilt. And I'm done protecting you from the consequences of your choices. The crowd was dead silent. Even my father seemed shocked into speechlessness. Mrs. Henderson, I turned to address her directly. You asked in your letter if I needed help escaping. I don't. But if you really want to help someone, help the next girl whose father sees her as property instead of a person. Help the next woman who gets sold off and has nowhere to turn. Don't waste your pity on me. I don't need it anymore. I turned to the crowd. I know what you all think. Poor Elena Whitmore, married off to the mountain devil. But you know what? That devil treats me better than anyone in this town ever did. He taught me to ride, to shoot, to survive. He respects me, trusts me, never once raised his hand to me or his voice in anger. Can any of your husbands say the same? Several women looked away. Several men shifted uncomfortably. My marriage isn't perfect, I continued. It started as a transaction, and that's something we both have to live with. But it's honest, and it's mine. And I'll be damned if I let any of you take that from me because you need someone to gossip about. This is absurd. My father's voice shook. She's been brainwashed. Can't you see that? He's isolated her, manipulated her. I have proof, Caleb said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Proof of what? My father demanded. Caleb pulled a folded document from his coat. This is the original marriage contract, signed by you, witnessed by 12 people from this town. It clearly states the terms you agreed to, including the amount of money you requested and the fact that you initiated the arrangement. He held it up for everyone to see. I also have copies of every letter you've sent demanding more money, every threat, every lie you told the authorities. My father's face went white. You can't. I can, and I will. If you continue to harass us, if you spread one more lie, I'll take this to every newspaper in the territory. Let everyone see what kind of man you really are. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The crowd was muttering now, people pulling back from my father, disgust replacing sympathy on their faces. Marcus, the blacksmith spoke up. Is this true? Did you go to Grayson first? My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It was complicated. It's a yes or no question, someone else called out. Yes, my father finally admitted, voice barely a whisper. But I had no choice. I was drowning in debt. What was I supposed to do? Not sell your daughter, Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the crowd, sharp with anger. What kind of father does that? One who's desperate, one who's selfish, I corrected. One who valued his pride more than his child. My father looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a moment I saw something break in his expression. Realization, maybe, or just the final death of whatever lie he'd been telling himself. Elena, he said softly, I'm your father. No, I replied. You were my father. You lost that right when you shook Caleb's hand and counted your money. Please, I don't forgive you. The words felt like cutting a rope I'd been clinging to. And I don't want you in my life anymore. Stay away from me. Stay away from my husband. We're done. I turned and walked back to the wagon, my whole body shaking. Caleb followed, and I could feel the crowd's eyes on us, but I didn't look back. Let's go, I said. You sure we haven't sold anything yet? I don't care. I got what I came for. We climbed into the wagon. As Caleb urged the horses forward, I heard my father call out one last time. You'll regret this, Elena. When he shows his true colors, when he hurts you, don't come crying to me. I didn't answer, didn't even turn around. Because the truth was, whatever Caleb's true colors were, they couldn't be worse than what I'd already survived. The ride back up the mountain was quiet at first. Then, about halfway up, Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Checking on you." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." I looked down at my hands. He was right. I was trembling so hard I could barely hold still. I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't find words for what I'd just done. "Brave," Caleb said. "That was incredibly brave. I basically disowned my only living parent in front of the entire town. You stood up to a man who'd been controlling you your whole life. That's different." "Is it?" I looked at him. What if he was right? What if I am making a mistake? "Do you think you are?" I thought about the last 2 months, the hard work, the arguments, the slowly growing trust between us, the way Caleb never demanded anything from me but always pushed me to be stronger. "No," I said finally. "I don't think it's a mistake." "Then that's all that matters." We sat there in silence, snow beginning to fall softly around us. Then Caleb did something unexpected. He reached over and took my hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for defending me, for standing beside me even when it cost you everything." "You gave me an out," I replied. "You could have kept me trapped. Instead, you gave me a choice. That matters more than you know." He squeezed my hand once, then released it and picked up the reins. "Let's go home." Home. The word settled into my chest like something warm and solid. We made it back just as darkness fell. Inside, the house was cold. We'd been gone all day and the fire had died down. While Caleb went to restart it, I put away our supplies and tried not to think about what I'd just done. Cut ties with my father. Publicly defended a man I barely knew. Chosen a life on an isolated mountain over everything familiar. Was I insane? Probably. But I felt more free than I ever had in my life. "Elena?" I turned to find Caleb standing in the doorway, firelight flickering behind him. "We need to talk," he said. My heart sank. "About what?" "About us. About what happens now." I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "Okay." He joined me, sitting across from the table like he had that first night. But everything felt different now. The air was charged with something I couldn't name. "Today changed things," he said carefully. "You stood up in front of everyone and claimed this marriage is yours. But I need to know, was that just for show, or did you mean it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I meant it in the moment. But I don't know what it means long term." "Fair enough." He studied his hands. "I'm going to be honest with you. When I agreed to this arrangement, I thought I was getting a housekeeper, someone to cook and clean and help manage the ranch. I didn't expect—" He stopped. Started again. "I didn't expect to actually care about you." My breath caught. "What? You've been here 2 months and you've completely turned my life upside down. You argue with me, challenge me, make me laugh when I don't want to. And somewhere along the way, this stopped being a transaction and started being something else." "Caleb, I'm not asking you to love me," he said quickly. "I know that's probably impossible, given how this started. But I need to know if there's any possibility that someday this could be real. A real marriage, not just an arrangement." I looked at him across the table, this man who'd terrified me 2 months ago, who'd become my teacher, my partner, my unexpected ally. And I realized something that should have scared me, but somehow didn't. "I don't know if I can ever love you," I said slowly. "But I don't hate you anymore, and I trust you, and I like who I'm becoming with you. That has to count for something." Relief flooded his expression. "That counts for everything." "But I need time," I added. "This has all happened so fast. I need time to figure out who I am outside of being someone's daughter or someone's wife." "Take all the time you need." He stood. "I'm not going anywhere." He started to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Elena, for what it's worth, I think who you're becoming is pretty remarkable." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a truth I wasn't quite ready to face. I was falling for him. Slowly, reluctantly, but falling nonetheless. And that terrified me more than anything my father had ever done. The next week passed in careful normalcy. We worked, we ate together, we talked about ranch business and weather, and nothing important. It felt like we were both waiting for something, though neither of us would say what. Then the letter came. It wasn't from my father this time. It was from a lawyer in Black Hollow, addressed to both of us. Caleb read it first. Then he handed it to me without a word, his face carved from stone. Mr. and Mrs. Grayson, I am writing on behalf of my client, Marcus Whitmore, who has filed formal legal proceedings to have your marriage annulled on the grounds of fraud and coercion. He is also seeking financial damages for emotional distress and seeking custody rights over his daughter, claiming she is being held against her will. A hearing has been scheduled for April 15th at the Territorial Courthouse. Your presence is mandatory. Failure to appear will result in a default judgment in favor of my client. Please arrange for legal representation immediately. Regards, Jonathan Pierce, attorney at law. I read it twice. Then I very calmly set it on the table and said, He's actually doing this. Yes. He's going to drag us to court, make this a public spectacle, try to have our marriage annulled. Yes. And if he wins? Caleb's jaw clenched. If he wins, you'd be sent back to him. The land transfer wouldn't happen. And I'd probably face criminal charges for fraud. That's insane. We have proof, witnesses, documents. We have those things. But he has a lawyer now, a good one from the looks of it. And he's betting that a judge will be more sympathetic to a father worried about his daughter than to the mountain devil who bought a wife. I felt sick. So what do? We fight. He picked up the letter. I know a lawyer in the territorial capital, a damn good one. We'll take all our evidence, get our witnesses lined up, and prove your father wrong in front of everyone. And if that's not enough? He looked at me then, and I saw fear in his eyes for the first time since I'd known him. Then I lose everything. Not everything, I said quietly. You still have the land, the ranch. That's not what I meant. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. He was talking about losing me. And somehow, at some point I hadn't noticed, that had started to matter to him as much as anything else. Maybe it mattered to me too. We won't lose, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We'll go to court. We'll tell the truth. We'll make them understand. You sure about that? No, I wasn't sure about anything anymore. But I said yes anyway. Because the alternative, going back to my father, losing Caleb, losing this life I'd started to build, that was unthinkable. So we'd fight. And either we'd win together or we'd burn together. Either way, I wasn't running anymore. The lawyer Caleb knew was a woman named Margaret Chen, and she scared me almost as much as the upcoming trial. She arrived at the ranch 3 days after we received the letter, riding up alone on a black mare, dressed in a sharp suit that looked completely out of place against the mountain backdrop. She was maybe 40, with steel gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that missed nothing. You must be Elena, she said, dismounting with practiced ease. I've heard quite a bit about you. All bad, I'm sure, I replied. She smiled. Actually, Caleb's been rather complimentary. That's unusual for him. Caleb emerged from the barn, looking uncomfortable. Margaret, thanks for coming. Wouldn't miss it. This case is exactly the kind of thing I live for. She pulled a leather satchel from her saddlebag. Now, let's get to work. We have exactly 3 weeks to build a defense that will destroy Marcus Whitmore's credibility completely. We spent the entire day going through everything, every document, every witness statement, every piece of correspondence between my father and Caleb. Margaret took notes in rapid shorthand, asking questions that cut straight to the bone. Did your father ever physically abuse you? No, not really. He grabbed my arm sometimes, shoved me once or twice when he was drunk, but nothing serious. That's still abuse, Elena. We can use that. I don't want to lie and say it was worse than it was. Margaret looked at me with something like respect. Good. Honesty will serve us better than exaggeration. What about emotional abuse? Control? Isolation? I told her everything. How he'd kept me home from school after my mother died. How he'd discouraged me from making friends or finding work. How he'd convinced me I was worthless without him. By the time I finished, I was shaking. Saying it all out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This is strong, Margaret said, setting down her pen. Very strong. But I need to prepare you for what Pierce is going to argue. He'll paint you as a victim of Stockholm Syndrome. He'll say Caleb isolated you, manipulated you, made you dependent on him so you'd defend the marriage. That's not what happened. I know that. You know that. But we need to prove it to a judge who's probably already heard terrible things about Caleb. She turned to him. No offense. None taken, Caleb said grimly. What's our strategy? We present Elena as the woman who made the best of an impossible situation and found her own power in the process. We show the land transfer clause. That's huge. No coercive husband gives his wife an escape route worth 1,500 acres. We bring in witnesses from town who saw the original arrangement, and we let Elena speak for herself. Margaret looked at me. Can you do that? Stand in front of a courtroom full of people and tell your story without breaking down? I don't know, I admitted. I barely held it together in the market square. Then we practice. Every day until the trial. You're going to tell this story so many times that you could recite it in your sleep. She wasn't kidding. For the next 3 weeks, Margaret drilled me relentlessly. She'd fire questions at me while I was cooking, feeding animals, trying to rest. She'd play Pierce, playing my father, playing hostile judges. She pushed and pushed until I could answer anything without hesitation. Why didn't you leave when you had the chance? Because I was building something worth keeping. Your father says Caleb threatened you. My father is lying to cover his own guilt. How do we know you're not just saying what Caleb told you to say? Because these are my words, my truth, and I'm done letting men tell me what I should think. Caleb watched these practice sessions with an expression I couldn't read, sometimes pride, sometimes worry. Once I caught him looking at me with something so raw it made my chest ache. One night, a week before the trial, I found him outside staring at the stars. Can't sleep? I asked, wrapping a blanket around myself. Thinking about the trial, about what happens if we lose. He didn't look at me. If the judge annuls the marriage, you'll be legally your father's responsibility again until you're 21. He could force you to come home, control your money, your choices, everything. That's not going to happen. But if it does, he finally turned to face me. Promise me something. If this goes wrong, if you end up back in Black Hollow, don't stay. Run. Go to Margaret. She'll help you get away. Start over somewhere new. Caleb, promise me, Elena. I can handle losing the land, facing charges, whatever, but I can't handle the thought of you trapped with him again. The intensity in his voice shook me. Why do you care so much? You really have to ask? Yes, I do. Because 3 months ago, I was just a transaction, just a solution to your loneliness. What changed? He stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the conflict in his eyes. You changed. Or maybe I did. I don't know. All I know is that somewhere between teaching you to ride and watching you stand up to your father, I stopped seeing you as a business arrangement and started seeing you as... He stopped. As what? As the person I want to wake up next to every morning for the rest of my life. The words hung in the cold air between us. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. That's not fair, I whispered. You can't say things like that right now, not when everything's so uncertain. Why not? What if we lose? What if this is our last week together? Don't I deserve to tell you the truth? And what am I supposed to do with that truth? Whatever you want. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so gentle it made my eyes burn. I'm not asking for anything, Elena. I just needed you to know. I should have stepped back, should have kept the distance we'd carefully maintained. But instead I moved closer until there was barely space between us. I'm scared, I admitted. Of the trial. Of losing. Of what I'm starting to feel for you. What are you starting to feel? I don't know. Something I never expected. Something that makes me want to fight for this marriage even though it terrifies me. His hand cupped my face. Is that enough? It has to be. He kissed me then. Soft at first, questioning. When I didn't pull away, he deepened it, and I felt something inside me crack open. All the fear, the anger, the confusion, it poured out and transformed into something else entirely. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Whatever happens in that courtroom, he said quietly, I want you to know this was real. Is real, not the arrangement, not the contract. This, us. I know, I whispered. I know. We stood there in the freezing night, holding each other like the world might end tomorrow. Maybe it would. The morning of the trial, I threw up twice. Margaret found me in the bathroom, pale and shaking. Nerves? Pure terror. Good. Use it. Fear makes you sharp. She handed me a damp cloth. Get cleaned up. We leave in an hour. The ride to the territorial courthouse took half a day. Margaret went over our strategy one more time, but I could barely focus. My mind kept spinning through worst-case scenarios. What if the judge sided with my father? What if they didn't believe me? What if I broke down on the stand? Elena, Caleb's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. Look at me. I did. You've survived everything else, he said. You'll survive this. The courthouse was an imposing stone building in the center of the territorial capital. People were already gathering outside, spectators drawn by the scandalous nature of the case. I heard whispers as we walked past. That's her. The girl who married the mountain devil. I heard he bought her like livestock. I kept my head high and didn't look at anyone. Inside, the courtroom was packed. My father sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer Pierce, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and an expression of practiced sympathy. When my father saw me, he actually smiled, like he'd already won. I wanted to scream. Don't react, Margaret murmured. That's what he wants. We took our seats at the defense table. The judge entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s named Judge Harriet Morrison. She surveyed the courtroom with clear distaste for the circus this had become. This court is now in session, she announced. We're here to examine the petition filed by Marcus Whitmore seeking annulment of the marriage between his daughter Elena and Caleb Grayson, plus damages for alleged fraud and coercion. Mr. Pierce, you may begin. Pierce stood, buttoning his jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. This is a simple case of a vulnerable young woman being manipulated by a man with significantly more power and resources. Marcus Whitmore is a father who made a desperate mistake in a moment of financial crisis, a mistake he deeply regrets. He seeks only to protect his daughter from further harm. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. Pierce continued, We will demonstrate that Caleb Grayson deliberately targeted Mr. Whitmore, exploited his financial distress, and essentially purchased Elena Whitmore as one might purchase property. Furthermore, we will show that Miss Whitmore has been isolated, manipulated, and coerced into defending a marriage she never truly consented to. He sat down, looking satisfied. Margaret rose. Your Honor, the defense sees this very differently. This is a case of a father attempting to escape responsibility for his own choices by scapegoating the man who legally and ethically entered into a marriage contract. We will prove that Mr. Whitmore initiated this arrangement, that all terms were agreed upon with full legal counsel present, and that Elena Grayson, not Whitmore, is a grown woman who has made her own choices about her life and her marriage. Judge Morrison nodded. Mr. Pierce, call your first witness. My father took the stand. I had to sit there and watch him perform. And he was good. I had to give him that. He painted himself as a desperate father who'd been manipulated by a predatory loner. He cried actual tears talking about how much he regretted letting me go. I just wanted to protect her, he said, voice breaking. But Grayson was so persuasive. He made it seem like the only option, and I was drowning in debt, not thinking clearly. I should have been stronger. I should have found another way. Pierce nodded sympathetically. And when did you realize your mistake? When Elena wrote me that first letter, it was so cold, so unlike her. That's when I knew he'd gotten to her, changed her, made her think this was normal. Lies. All lies. Margaret stood for cross-examination, and I saw my father's confidence waver. Mr. Whitmore, she said pleasantly, you testified that Mr. Grayson was persuasive and manipulative, but didn't you actually seek him out first? I'd heard he might be looking for... Yes or no, please. Did you initiate contact with Mr. Grayson? A pause. Yes. And isn't it true that during negotiations, you actually lowered your asking price twice? I was desperate. Yes or no? Yes, he admitted quietly. So desperate that you reduced the amount from $5,000 to $3,000 and finally to $2,000, just to ensure the deal would go through. It's more complicated than... Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence the original contract showing these price negotiations. Margaret handed documents to the judge. Mr. Whitmore, does a man being coerced typically negotiate his price downward? My father's face was red. I needed the money. For what, specifically? General debts. Gambling debts. Isn't that correct? You owed money to several establishments in Black Hollow for gambling losses? Pierce stood. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, It goes to Mr. Whitmore's motivation and credibility, Margaret argued. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Margaret pressed on. Mr. Whitmore, were these gambling debts? Yes, he finally said. But that doesn't change. It changes everything. You sold your daughter to pay for your gambling problem, then tried to get more money afterward, and when that failed, you filed this lawsuit. Does that about sum it up? No, I love my daughter. I'm trying to save her. Save her from what? A husband who respects her? Who gave her property rights in case she wanted to leave? Who taught her skills to survive independently? Margaret's voice was sharp now. Or are you trying to save her from the freedom to choose her own life? Objection! Pierce was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. Ms. Chen, tone it down. No further questions, Margaret said, returning to her seat. My father stumbled off the stand, looking shaken. But Pierce wasn't done. He called a parade of witnesses from Black Hollow, people who testified about how isolated the mountain was, how strange Caleb seemed, how worried they'd been about me. Mrs. Henderson took the stand and talked about my letters. They just didn't sound like Elena, so formal, so defensive. I truly believe she was being forced to write them. Pierce nodded. And when you saw her in town, what was your impression? She seemed different, harder, like she'd been through something traumatic and was covering it up. I wanted to scream that yes, I'd been through something traumatic, 20 years with my father, but Margaret's hand on my arm kept me silent. Finally, Pierce rested his case. It was our turn. Margaret called Caleb first. He took the stand with his usual calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Pierce circled him like a shark. Mr. Grayson, you live alone on a mountain, correct? Yes. That's an unusual choice. What made you seek such isolation? I prefer it. Or perhaps you prefer being away from people who might question your behavior, Pierce suggested. Objection, Margaret said. Speculation. Sustained. Pierce tried another angle. You purchased a wife through a financial transaction. Do you consider that normal? No, Caleb said calmly. But it's legal, and it's what we both agreed to. Did Elena have any say in the matter? She had the legal right to refuse. She didn't. Because her father had already signed the papers without consulting her. That's between her and her father. How convenient for you. Pierce leaned in. Tell me, Mr. Grayson, why did you include that property clause, the one giving Elena land if she left? Because I wanted her to know she had a choice. Or because you knew that if this ever came to light, you'd need evidence that you hadn't completely trapped her? Caleb's jaw clenched. No. No further questions. Margaret stood for redirect. Caleb, that property clause, it was added before Marcus Whitmore saw the final contract, correct? Yes. So you added it privately, with no expectation that anyone would know about it unless Elena chose to leave? Yes. And you never told Elena about it until recently? Correct. Why not? Caleb looked directly at me. Because I wanted her to stay because she chose to, not because she felt obligated or because she knew about the land. I wanted her choice to be genuine. Something in the courtroom shifted. I saw Judge Morrison's expression change slightly. Thank you, Margaret said. Your witness. Pierce declined further questions. Then Margaret said the words I'd been dreading. The defense calls Elena Grayson. My legs barely held me as I walked to the stand. The bailiff swore me in and I sat down, looking out at a courtroom full of strangers waiting to judge my life. Margaret approached with a kind smile. Elena, I know this is difficult. Take your time. I nodded. Let's start with your childhood. What was your relationship with your father like? I took a breath. When I was little, it was good. He was loving, present. But after my mother died when I was 17, everything changed. He started drinking, gambling, and I became more of a caretaker than a daughter. How so? I cooked, cleaned, managed the household. He stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as useful, someone to take care of him. Did he ever discuss your future with you? No, he discouraged me from going to school or finding work, said I was needed at home. My voice caught. I think he was afraid I'd leave him alone. So when he arranged your marriage, was that discussed with you first? No, he told me 2 weeks before it happened. Presented it as done. Non-negotiable. How did that make you feel? Betrayed, worthless, like I was a problem he needed to solve instead of a daughter he loved. Margaret nodded. And when you arrived at the ranch, what was your impression of Caleb? I was terrified, I admitted. I believed all the rumors. I thought he'd hurt me. Did he? No, he gave me my own room. He taught me skills. He respected my boundaries. He treated me like I mattered. Elena, your father claims you've been brainwashed, manipulated. What do you say to that? I looked at my father sitting at the plaintiff's table, refusing to meet my eyes. I say he doesn't know what those words mean, I said clearly. Manipulation is what he did for 20 years, making me feel worthless without him, isolating me, selling me when I became inconvenient. What Caleb did was the opposite. He gave me choices. He taught me I could be strong. He showed me what respect looks like. If that's manipulation, then I wish someone had manipulated me sooner. Tears were running down my face now, but I didn't care. My father wants this marriage annulled because it makes him look bad, because it forces him to face what he did. But I won't be his cover story anymore. This marriage is mine. I chose it. I choose it now. And no court should have the power to take that away from me because my father regrets his own choices. The courtroom was dead silent. Margaret smiled. No further questions, Your Honor. Pierce stood slowly. This was it, the real test. Miss Whitmore, excuse me, Mrs. Grayson. That was quite a speech. Did you rehearse it? Yes. My lawyer prepared me because she knew you'd try to make me sound foolish. Several people in the gallery laughed. Judge Morrison's mouth twitched. Pierce frowned. You claim your father isolated you, yet you lived in town, had access to other people, could have sought help at any time. From who? Everyone in Black Hollow knew my father. They felt sorry for him. Poor widower raising a daughter alone. No one saw what happened behind closed doors. And yet you want us to believe that a man you'd never met, living in complete isolation, was somehow better? He was honest. That's better than anything my father ever gave me. Pierce's expression hardened. You're 20 years old, young, impressionable. Isn't it possible that you've confused survival instincts with genuine feeling? No. No? Just like that? Yes. Just like that. Because I know the difference between making the best of a bad situation and actually choosing something. I chose to stay. I chose to defend my marriage. I chose to cut ties with my father. Those are my choices, Mr. Pierce. Mine. And I'm done letting men tell me they know better than I do about my own life. Pierce looked at Judge Morrison. Your Honor, I think we can see clearly that— I'm not finished, I interrupted. Everyone stared. You don't interrupt lawyers in court. But I didn't care anymore. I need to say something to my father. Judge Morrison considered. Go ahead. I turned to face him directly. You want to know why I changed? Why I'm harder and different? Because I had to be. You forced me to be. When you sold me, you broke something between us that can never be fixed. And instead of accepting that and letting me move on, you're dragging me through court, humiliating me all over again, just so you don't have to face what you did. That's not love. That's not protection. That's control. And I'm done being controlled by you. My father's face crumpled. Elena, please. I loved you, I continued, my voice breaking. I would have done anything for you, but you didn't want a daughter. You wanted a servant, a solution. And when I stopped being useful, you got rid of me. So no, this marriage isn't perfect. It started as a transaction, but at least it's honest. At least Caleb never pretended to love me while treating me like property. You don't get to call that manipulation. You don't get to play victim. You lost the right to call yourself my father the moment you counted that money. Silence. Complete silence. Then my father stood, shaking. You don't understand what I sacrificed for you. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore, Judge Morrison commanded. He sat. She looked at me. Mrs. Grayson, you may step down. I returned to my seat beside Caleb. His hand found mine under the table and held tight. Judge Morrison addressed the courtroom. I'll issue my ruling tomorrow at 9 a.m. Court is adjourned. We filed out in silence. Outside, Margaret grabbed my arm. That was either brilliant or suicidal, she said. We'll find out tomorrow. That night back at the hotel, I couldn't sleep. Caleb sat with me, neither of us talking, just existing in the same space. Whatever happens, he finally said, you were incredible today. I lost my temper. You told the truth. That's different. What if she rules against us? Then we figure out the next step. There might not be a next step. He pulled me close. Then we make one. I buried my face in his shoulder and let myself cry. For everything I'd lost. For everything I might lose tomorrow. For the father I'd wanted and the one I'd actually had. Caleb held me through all of it, and that's when I knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever the judge decided, I'd made the right choice. This was real. We were real, and nothing my father did could take that away. The courtroom was packed tighter than the day before when we arrived at 8:30. Word had spread about my testimony, and now it seemed like half the territory wanted to see how this would end. I sat between Caleb and Margaret, my hands folded in my lap to hide the shaking. Across the aisle, my father stared straight ahead, his face gray and haggard. Pierce whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. At exactly 9 a.m., Judge Morrison entered. We all stood. "Be seated," she said, arranging papers on her bench. The room fell silent except for the rustling of fabric and nervous breathing. My heart hammered so hard I thought everyone must hear it. Judge Morrison looked out at the courtroom, her expression unreadable. "I've reviewed all testimony, examined all evidence, and considered both parties' arguments. This case hinges on a fundamental question. Does a legal contract made between adults become invalid simply because one party later regrets their decision?" She paused. I couldn't breathe. "Mr. Whitmore claims he was coerced. The evidence shows he initiated contact, negotiated terms, and signed willingly with legal witnesses present. He claims his daughter is being held against her will. The evidence shows she has property rights that would allow her to leave at any time. He claims Mr. Grayson manipulated both of them. The evidence shows Mr. Grayson has acted within all legal boundaries and, in fact, provided his wife with more autonomy than the law requires." My father's shoulders slumped. "However," Judge Morrison continued, and my brief hope shattered, "this court must also consider the unusual nature of this arrangement. Marriage is not meant to be a business transaction. The fact that it was conducted as such raises legitimate questions about consent and coercion, regardless of legality." No. That said, she looked directly at me, I was particularly struck by Mrs. Grayson's testimony yesterday. Not the prepared parts, but the moment when she interrupted counsel to speak directly to her father. That was not the behavior of a woman under duress. That was the behavior of a woman who has found her voice and refuses to be silenced. Something shifted in my chest. I've seen real victims of coercion and abuse. They don't speak the way Mrs. Grayson spoke yesterday. They don't defend their captors with that kind of conviction. They don't cut ties with their families in open court. Judge Morrison set down her papers. Mrs. Grayson is not a victim. She's a young woman who was put in an impossible situation by her father's choices and made the best of it. That's not a crime. That's survival. My father made a small sound like a wounded animal. Therefore, I'm denying the petition for annulment. The marriage between Elena and Caleb Grayson is legal and will remain so. Furthermore, I'm dismissing all claims for damages. Mr. Whitmore, you entered into a contract of your own free will. You don't get to weaponize the legal system because you changed your mind. The courtroom erupted. People talking, shouting, some cheering. I sat frozen, trying to process what I'd just heard. We won. We actually won. However, Judge Morrison raised her voice over the noise, I am ordering one additional measure. Mr. Whitmore, you are hereby prohibited from contacting your daughter or her husband for a period of no less than 5 years. Any violation will result in criminal charges. Do you understand? My father stood shakily. Your Honor, please. Do you understand? His voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Good. In addition, I am ordering you to pay all court costs and the defendant's legal fees. This case was frivolous and wasted this court's time. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. The sound of that gavel felt like a door slamming shut on my old life. Margaret was hugging me, saying something about a brilliant victory, but I couldn't focus. I turned to Caleb, and the look on his face, pure relief mixed with something deeper, broke through my shock. We won, I said stupidly. You won, he corrected. That was all you. Then we were standing, and people were congratulating us, and my father was being led out by Pierce, and everything felt surreal and overwhelming. I caught my father's eye as he reached the door. For a moment, I thought he might say something. An apology, maybe, or one last attempt at manipulation. But he just looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Then he was gone, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, just release. We left the courthouse through a side exit to avoid the crowd. Margaret walked us to our wagon, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "That was the most satisfying verdict I've had in years," she said. "Your father's lawyer looked like he wanted to sink through the floor." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now? You go home. Live your life. Stop looking over your shoulder." She squeezed my hand. "You're free, Elena. Actually, legally, completely free." The word felt foreign. Free. We paid Margaret her fee. Caleb handed over a bank draft without hesitation, and she promised to send final paperwork within the week. Then she rode off toward her next case, leaving us alone in the street. "Ready to go home?" Caleb asked. Home. Not his home. Not the ranch. Just home. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." The ride back took hours, but I barely noticed the passing time. My mind kept replaying the trial, the verdict, the look on my father's face. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for 4 months and could finally exhale. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked as we climbed into the mountains. "That I should feel different. Lighter, maybe. But I just feel tired." "That's normal. You've been fighting for so long. Now that it's over, your body's catching up." "Is it really over?" He glanced at me. "You heard the judge. 5 years no contact. By then, you'll be 25. Legally, he'll have no claim on you at all." "And us? What about us?" I took a breath. "We got married because of a transaction. We stayed married because of the trial. Now that's done. Now we have to figure out what we are without all that external pressure." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "And what do you want us to be?" "I don't know. I know I don't want to leave. I know being with you feels right in a way nothing else in my life ever has. But I also know we rushed into this, and maybe we need to actually get to know each other without constantly being in crisis mode." "Fair enough." He smiled slightly. "So what do you suggest?" "I suggest we start over. Not the marriage, that part's staying, but everything else. We date, we court, we figure out if we actually like each other when we're not fighting for survival." "You want to date your own husband?" "Why not? People do things backwards all the time. Why not us?" He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected and genuine that I found myself laughing too. And suddenly, for the first time in months, everything felt lighter. We got back to the ranch just as sunset painted the mountains gold and purple. The house looked exactly the same, but somehow it felt different, like it had been waiting for us to finally arrive. "Home," I said softly, climbing down from the wagon. Caleb came around to stand beside me. "Home," he agreed. That night, we sat by the fire like we had dozens of times before. But this time felt different. No legal threats hanging over us, no fear of what might happen, just two people trying to figure out what came next. "So," Caleb said, poking at the fire, "if we're dating, I should probably know more about you. What's your favorite color?" "Really? That's what you want to know?" "We're starting from the beginning, right? Might as well do it properly." I smiled. "Blue, like the sky in winter. What's yours?" "Green, like new grass in spring." He glanced at me. "What did you want to be when you were little, before everything got complicated?" The question caught me off guard. I wanted to be a teacher. I loved reading, loved learning. Thought maybe I could help other kids love it too. Saying it out loud made my chest ache with old dreams. "What about you?" "I wanted to be a veterinarian. Loved animals. Still do, obviously. But the schooling cost too much, and by the time I could afford it, I was already working ranches." He shrugged. "Life takes you different places than you plan." "You could still do it. Go to school. I mean, at 32, starting over?" "Why not? I'm 20 and I'm starting over. Age doesn't matter." He looked at me with something like wonder. "You really believe that, don't you? That it's never too late to change?" "I have to believe it. Otherwise, what was all of this for?" We talked until the fire burned low. Small things, silly things, the kind of conversation people have when they're trying to understand each other. I learned he hated coffee, but loved tea. that he could play harmonica but was too self-conscious to do it in front of people, that his mother had died when he was young, just like mine, and he still missed her every day. He learned I could draw, that I'd filled notebooks with sketches as a kid before my father threw them away, that I was terrified of deep water but loved snow, that I had a scar on my knee from falling out of a tree when I was 7. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. "Thank you," I said as we headed upstairs. "For what?" "For giving me the land clause, for not telling me about it, for trusting me to make my own choice." He stopped at his bedroom door. "You don't need to thank me for treating you like a person, Elena. That should be the baseline." "Maybe, but it's not. And you did better than that. You gave me power when everyone else was trying to take it away." I stood on my toes and kissed his cheek. "That matters." His hand caught mine. "Elena?" "Yeah? I know we're taking things slow and getting to know each other properly, but I need you to know something." He pulled me closer. "I'm already in love with you. Have been for a while now. I'm not saying that to pressure you or rush you, just so you know where I stand." My breath caught. "Caleb, you don't have to say it back. You don't have to feel the same way. I wanted to be honest." I looked up at him, this man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago and was now the most important person in my life. And I realized something that should have terrified me, but somehow didn't. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," I whispered. "I don't know when it started. Maybe when you taught me to ride. Maybe when you stood up to those deputies. Maybe when you put that clause in our contract without telling me. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about survival and started being about choosing you every day, even when it's hard." He kissed me then, slow and gentle and full of promise. When we broke apart, we were both smiling. "So," he said, "does this mean we're skipping straight to the good part of dating?" "Absolutely not. You still owe me proper courtship, flowers, compliments, the works." "In the middle of nowhere? On a mountain?" "Figure it out, Grayson. You bought me, you married me, you dragged me through court. The least you can do is woo me properly." He laughed. "Yes, ma'am." We stood in that hallway, holding each other, and I realized this was the moment I'd been waiting for without knowing it. Not the trial verdict, not my father's defeat. This, peace, choice, love that wasn't bought or forced but earned through honesty and respect, and the hard work of 2 broken people trying to heal together. The next few months passed like a dream I was afraid to wake from. Spring came to the mountains, melting the snow and revealing green underneath. Caleb taught me to fish in the streams, and I was terrible at it, but he found my cursing at the escaped fish hilarious. I taught him to draw, and he was surprisingly good at sketching the animals. We worked the ranch together, and I stopped seeing it as work and started seeing it as building something. Our life. Our future. True to my demand, Caleb courted me properly. He brought me wildflowers every week, carved me a jewelry box for my birthday, took me on picnics to overlooks where we could see for miles, told me stories about the land and listened to my dreams about maybe opening a school someday for mountain children who couldn't get to town. "You'd be a great teacher," he said one evening as we watched the sunset. "Patient, creative. You see potential in things other people overlook. Like you, like both of us." He pulled me closer. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? 2 people everyone else threw away, making something beautiful out of scraps." "Is that what we're doing?" "I think so. I think we're proving that how something starts doesn't matter nearly as much as what you choose to do with it." In July, we got news that my father had left Black Hollow, moved east somewhere, started over where people didn't know his story. Part of me felt relief. Part of me felt something like pity. He'd lost his daughter trying to control her, and now he had to live with that choice for the rest of his life. I didn't forgive him. Maybe I never would. But I stopped carrying him around in my head, stopped letting his voice dictate what I thought I deserved. Margaret visited once, in August. She looked around the ranch with approval. "You've done well for yourself," she said, watching me work with the horses. "Both of you." "Thanks to you," I replied. "No, thanks to you. I just showed the judge who you already were." She smiled. "Most people in your situation would have stayed victims, would have accepted the narrative everyone else wrote for them. You didn't. That's why you won." After she left, I thought about what she'd said, about victims and narratives and choice. I'd spent so long feeling like things happened to me, like I was a supporting character in someone else's story. But that wasn't true. I was the main character of my own life, always had been. I just needed to realize it. The turning point came in September, exactly 1 year after I'd arrived at the ranch. Caleb found me on the porch one morning watching the sunrise. He sat down beside me holding 2 cups of tea. "Happy anniversary," he said. I took the cup. "You remembered. Kind of a significant date. The day my life stopped being lonely and started being complicated." "Thanks, I think." He smiled. "Elena, I have something for you." He handed me a folded document. When I opened it, I saw it was a deed to the 1,500 acres from our contract, signed and notarized, transferring full ownership to me. "What? But I didn't leave. The clause said only if I left." The clause was insurance. This is a gift. He watched me process it. "You stayed. You chose this life. Chose me. Chose us. I want you to have the land anyway, not as an escape route, as proof that this ranch is as much yours as mine, that you're not just my wife, you're my partner in everything." Tears streamed down my face. "Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Whatever we build here, we build together, equal." I set down my tea and kissed him, pouring every emotion I couldn't name into it. When we broke apart, I was laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you," I said. "I really, genuinely, completely love you. Not because I have to, not because you saved me, because you're you, and I'm me, and somehow we fit. Even though I bought you? Especially because you bought me and then gave me the power to leave. You gave me choice, Caleb. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." We sat on that porch watching the sun rise over our mountains, over our land, over our life. And I realized something profound. Love isn't about how a story starts. It's not about perfect circumstances or ideal conditions. It's about what you choose to do when life throws you into impossible situations. It's about the people who see you at your worst and decide you're worth fighting for anyway. My marriage started as a transaction. My husband was a stranger who paid money for a wife he didn't know. By every logical measure, this should have been a disaster. But logic doesn't account for human resilience, for the way 2 broken people can help each other heal, for the way respect can grow into trust, and trust can grow into love, and love can become the foundation for something lasting. 2 years later, I stood in that same spot, but I wasn't alone anymore. Caleb held our 6-month-old daughter, Sarah, named for his first wife, because he'd learned you can honor the past while building the future. She had my eyes and his dark hair and the loudest cry I'd ever heard. "She's going to be trouble," Caleb said, bouncing her gently. "Good. The world needs more trouble from women." He laughed. "Fair point." The ranch had grown. We'd hired 2 hands to help with the work. I'd started a small school in one of the outbuildings, teaching the children of mountain families who couldn't make the trip to town. Caleb had enrolled in veterinary courses by correspondence, studying late into the night while I graded simple arithmetic papers. We were building something neither of us could have imagined that first terrible day in the general store. Sometimes people from Black Hollow would visit. Mrs. Henderson brought her granddaughter to the school, apologizing again for not seeing the truth sooner. The blacksmith's son came to learn ranching. Even some of the women who'd whispered about me came to ask how I'd found the courage to leave a toxic situation. I always told them the same thing. You don't find courage, you build it. One small choice at a time, one boundary set, one truth told, one day of choosing yourself over someone else's comfort. My father never contacted us. Last I heard, he was working in a factory somewhere in Pennsylvania, sober, alone, living with his choices. I hoped he found peace, but I didn't need him to for me to have mine. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, shifting Sarah to his other shoulder. "How far we've come. How different everything is from what I expected. Regrets? Not a single one." I leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. You couldn't have. I wasn't ready to be found. I needed to be broken first so I could rebuild myself stronger." He kissed the top of my head. Wise words from someone so young. "I'm 22, ancient, practically elderly." We laughed, and Sarah made a small noise of protest at the disturbance. Caleb rocked her gently, humming something soft. I watched them, my husband and my daughter, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the twisted path that had led me here. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be standing on a mountain ranch, teaching children, married to a man I actually loved, raising a daughter in freedom and respect, I would have called them insane. But here I was, living a life I'd built from the ashes of someone else's mistakes. That's the thing about being sold like property. It either destroys you or it teaches you your own worth. I chose the latter. And in choosing it, I discovered something powerful. You can't buy love, you can't purchase respect, you can't own another person's soul. But you can create conditions for love to grow. You can build respect through consistent action. You can offer freedom and hope the other person chooses to stay. Caleb did all of that. And I chose to stay. And we built something real from a foundation that should have crumbled. People in town still talked about us sometimes. The mountain devil and the girl he bought. But the story had changed. Now they talked about the school I ran, the sick animals Caleb healed, the way we'd proved everyone wrong. We weren't a cautionary tale anymore. We were proof that broken beginnings don't guarantee broken endings. As the sun set over the mountains that night, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I thought about everything I'd learned. I learned that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up when you need them, who respects your boundaries, who gives you room to grow even when it's uncomfortable for them. I learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. My father chose his path. I chose mine. That's not abandonment, that's survival. I learned that love earned through hardship is stronger than love that comes easy. Caleb and I fought for this. We built it piece by piece through honesty and respect and the hard work of two people learning to trust again. Most importantly, I learned that I am not defined by how I was treated, not by my father's betrayal, not by being sold, not by the shame people tried to make me carry. I am defined by how I responded, by the choices I made, by the strength I found when I thought I had none left. I was Elena Whitmore, a girl who thought her life was over at 20. Now I'm Elena Grayson, a woman who knows it was just beginning. And if my story teaches anything, I hope it's this. You are not your circumstances. You are not what people did to you. You are what you choose to do next. I chose to stay when I could have left. I chose to fight when I could have surrendered. I chose to love when I could have stayed bitter. And those choices made all the difference. Caleb came up behind me, wrapping his free arm around my waist. You okay? More than okay. I'm happy. Good. You deserve to be. So do you. He rested his chin on my head. We're going to be okay, aren't we? All of us? I looked out at the ranch we'd built together, at the life we'd created from impossible circumstances, at the future stretching before us, unknown but no longer frightening. Yeah, I said, we're going to be more than okay. And for the first time in my entire life, I believed it. The mountains stood silent and strong around us, witnesses to our story. A story that started with betrayal and transaction, but ended with choice and love. Not perfect love, not fairy tale love, but real love. The kind that grows slowly and roots deep. The kind that survives winters and storms and the weight of the past. The kind of love that can't be bought or sold. Only chosen, again and again, every single day. And every single day we chose each other. That was enough. That was everything. That was home.